45 years ago, a single moment stole a mother's entire world. Savannah, Georgia, had always been a city of slow afternoons and gentle breezes. But on the summer day, Evelyn Carter lost her son. Everything moved too fast. The streets were crowded for the annual Riverfront Festival, a celebration filled with music, food stalls, and the loud laughter of families. Evelyn, then a graceful 4-5-year-old widow, held tightly to the small hand of her 5-year-old boy, Henry. He was the center of her world, a bright-eyed child with a curious smile who loved chasing the colors of the festival balloons. For a brief second, Evelyn turned her head to pay for a funnel cake. It was only a heartbeat, one tiny, innocent moment, but when she looked back, Henry was gone. Panic hit her like a physical blow. She called his name, her voice swallowed by the music and crowd. "Henry! Henry!" She pushed through the river of people, her heart pounding, her hands trembling. The world became a blur of strangers' faces as she searched desperately for the familiar little boy in a blue shirt and dusty sneakers. Meanwhile, Henry, confused by the noise and separated by a sudden surge of festival-goers, tried to push his way back toward the sound of his mother's voice. He cried out for her, but the crowd kept moving, sweeping him farther away. His small legs stumbled onto the nearby road, where traffic officers struggled to control the festival overflow. Amid the chaos, a delivery truck rounded the corner too quickly. The brakes screeched, but not fast enough. Henry's world went dark. By the time emergency crews arrived, the child was unconscious, badly injured, and with no identification except for a tiny silver bracelet on his wrist, one that Evelyn had clasped on him just 2 years earlier. She had chosen it because it was simple, durable, and safe. She never imagined it would be the only thing tying him to her in the worst moment of his life. But hospitals were overwhelmed that day, and confusion spread as fast as fear. With no parent immediately present and Henry unable to speak, he was recorded as an unidentified minor and transferred to a county medical facility miles away. When Evelyn raced to local hospitals, pleading for news of a missing child, she was repeatedly told no such patient had been admitted. The city seemed to swallow Henry whole. For days, then weeks, Evelyn searched endlessly. She placed posters, contacted police, begged the media for help. Her voice cracked in every interview as she described her son's smile, his laugh, the way he tugged at her dress when he was nervous. But every lead dissolved into dust. Savannah, once her beloved home, became a place of unbearable echoes, each corner a painful reminder of the little boy she could no longer hold. The heartbreak carved itself into her life, into her wrinkles, into every quiet night she spent staring at the empty bed Henry once slept in. And as the years stretched on, one truth settled heavily on her shoulders. A single moment had changed everything, and her son was gone. Henry's life did not end on the day of the accident, but everything familiar about it did. When he finally woke in the sterile silence of a county rehabilitation ward, he was unable to move his legs. The doctors, gentle but honest, explained that the spinal damage was severe. A 5-year-old child who should have been running through playgrounds was instead learning that his legs would never again carry him. He didn't cry at first. Trauma had numbed him. Confusion wrapped itself tightly around his small mind. He didn't understand why his mother wasn't there, why no familiar voice soothed him, why no gentle hand brushed the hair from his forehead. He asked for her again and again in small, trembling whispers. The nurses searched every missing child report, every alert, but nothing matched. No one came for him. Days turned into weeks. The posters Evelyn hung across Savannah never reached the distant county hospital where Henry lay. By the time a police notice finally connected an unidentified disabled boy to a missing child inquiry, Henry had already been transferred again, this time to a temporary foster system overwhelmed by children needing care. Paperwork, mistakes, and miscommunication buried his identity deeper. It was as if fate itself wanted the boy to vanish. But fate, cruel as it was, did send him 2 angels. Mark and Linda Cooper were a working-class couple living in a weathered single-wide mobile home on the outskirts of Glynn County. They had little money, but endless compassion. Linda worked part-time as a housekeeper, and Mark did shifts at a local hardware store. They couldn't have children of their own, and when they saw Henry, thin, frightened, and unable to walk, they chose love over fear. "He needs us," Linda whispered to Mark the first day they met him. Her voice cracked slightly, touched by the sight of a boy trying so hard not to cry. They brought him home. Life with the Coopers was simple, but warm. Henry learned the rhythm of the household, Linda humming while she folded laundry, Mark's heavy boots stomping up the wooden steps after work, the smell of cornbread baking on Sundays. The couple never hid the truth about his condition, but they never treated him as broken. "You're strong," Mark often told him. "You survived what many couldn't." Henry clung to those words. As he grew older, he became more helpful, learning to move around the small home in a wheelchair that Mark repaired from scrap parts. But the Coopers didn't want Henry trapped inside. They wanted him to feel purpose, and fate this time gently opened a door. Just down the road was Benny's Kitchen, a tiny soul food diner run by a short, round man named Benny Thompson. Benny had a soft heart beneath his gruff exterior. When he heard Henry wanted to learn cooking, he cleared a space near the prep counter. "He can't stand," Mark explained apologetically. "He doesn't need to," Benny replied. "He just needs heart. The rest I can teach." At 10 years old, Henry began helping in the kitchen. He couldn't carry plates or wipe tables, but he could chop herbs, stir sauces, and season food with an astonishing instinct. His hands became his freedom. The sizzling of pans, the warm smell of onions and garlic, the laughter of the diner staff, all of it became the closest thing Henry had to belonging. Customers adored him. He would peek over the counter, shy but smiling, proud when someone praised a dish he helped prepare. Benny often ruffled his hair and said, "Kid, you got a gift, a real one." For the first time since the accident, Henry felt alive. But happiness has a way of slipping from his grasp. One humid summer evening, the Cooper home filled with the smell of boiling stew, Linda humming as she cleaned the stove. A faulty old gas line, one they'd planned to fix when they saved enough, began leaking. Mark walked in from work, kissed his wife on the forehead, and turned the burner to start dinner. The explosion was instant. Neighbors miles away heard the thunderous blast as fire engulfed the trailer. The Coopers never had a chance. They died before help arrived. Henry, thrown from his wheelchair by the shockwave, survived only because the flame didn't reach him immediately. But survival came at a cost. Burns scarred his face, his arms, and most tragically, the injury robbed him of his remaining vision. The world went black permanently. He woke in the hospital once again alone. This time, there was no frantic mother searching, no adoptive parents waiting to take him home, just the cold truth that he had lost everything again. At 10 years old, Henry faced a world he could neither walk through nor see. Social services tried to place him in new foster homes, but families feared the medical burden. Some households were already overwhelmed. Others simply didn't want a disabled, blind child who required constant care. Weeks passed, then months. Henry was moved from one temporary facility to another, each more crowded than the last. He learned silence. He learned not to hope. By 13, he was sent to an underfunded group home. By 15, the budget cuts shut it down. With nowhere stable to go and no family willing to take him, he drifted into homelessness, not out of rebellion, but out of abandonment. He learned to survive by listening. The shuffle of shoes meant generosity. The slowing of steps meant hesitation. The clatter of dropped coins meant kindness from someone too embarrassed to speak. The world became a collection of sounds, smells, and vibrations against the concrete beneath him. He slept in shelters when he could, under bridges when he could not. Some nights he went hungry. Some nights he found half-eaten sandwiches in trash bins behind restaurants. Every day stretched endlessly into the next. Henry stopped imagining what his mother looked like. Her face blurred from his memory as the darkness inside him grew. Yet somewhere, miles away, Evelyn Carter still whispered prayers for the son she never stopped believing was alive. And for Henry now, a damaged man drifting through life, those unanswered prayers were all that tethered him faintly to the world, though he did not know it. Fate had torn them apart for decades, but fate had not yet written its final chapter. By the time Henry reached 50, the world had carved deep lines of hardship into his skin. He had long since learned to accept the darkness that filled every waking moment. He remembered light only as a distant sensation, warmth on his face, the faint glow behind closed eyelids. But shapes, colors, the faces of people, those had faded into memory years ago. The world to Henry was texture, temperature, the rush of air when someone walked past, the tremble in a voice when a stranger hesitated to offer him help. Savannah's historic district, with its brick paths and oak trees dripping Spanish moss, was beautiful to those who could see it. To Henry, it was simply where he existed. He spent most days on River Street, sitting on a worn blanket that someone had once given him out of pity. He leaned against the cold stone wall of an old building, a cardboard sign resting beside him, just trying to survive. His voice was soft, never demanding, only quietly hopeful. Some days he earned enough for a simple meal. Other days, the coins that clinked into his cup weren't enough even for a sandwich. But Henry never complained. He had grown numb to disappointment. What he missed most wasn't food, or warmth, or even safety. It was belonging. The sound of families laughing as they passed filled him with an ache he couldn't express. He didn't envy their wealth, he envied their connection. A mother calling her child close. A father lifting a toddler onto his shoulders. The simple rhythm of a life shared with someone who cared. These sounds reminded him of the life he once had, and the life stolen from him before he even understood its worth. Sometimes, late at night, when the streets grew quiet and the river wind cut through his thin jacket, Henry would imagine a woman's voice calling his name, soft, worried, familiar, a voice he hadn't heard since he was 5 years old. Henry, sweetheart, stay close. But the imagined voice always faded, replaced by the cold truth that he no longer had anyone to stay close to. He had become invisible. While Henry fought every day to exist, just a few miles away, Evelyn Carter, now 90 years old, lived in a mansion filled with silence. Her home, an elegant southern estate, framed by tall white columns, once echoed with parties and music. Now, the only sounds were the slow tick of a grandfather clock and the careful footsteps of her caretaker, Maria. Evelyn had spent nearly half a century searching for her son. Police reports, private investigators, newspaper ads, nothing led her to Henry. Over time, people began urging her to accept the inevitable. "It's been decades, Mrs. Carter," they would gently say. "He's gone. You must move on." But how could she? She kept Henry's old toys in a glass cabinet in her bedroom. A small blue sweater he wore at age 5 still hung in her closet. And every morning, she placed her wrinkled hand over her heart and whispered the same words. "Wherever you are, my boy, I hope you're loved." But deep inside, she feared the truth that her son might have lived a life filled with suffering. That fear haunted her. One cold December afternoon, Evelyn asked Maria to take her for a walk along River Street. She hadn't been there in years, not since the day she lost Henry. But something inside her urged her to go. Maybe it was nostalgia, maybe grief, or maybe, without realizing it, her heart was leading her toward the child she still longed for. The wind was sharp against her thin skin as she stepped out of the car, gripping her cane. The sound of the river brought back a flood of memories, some beautiful, some devastating. Maria walked beside her, ready to guide her carefully along the uneven bricks. "Are you sure you want to be here, Mrs. Carter?" she asked softly. Evelyn nodded, though her eyes glistened with old pain. "This place took something from me," she whispered. "But maybe I need to face it again." They walked slowly, passing musicians and vendors. Evelyn listened to the sounds, letting them pull her into the past. And then, just a few steps later, she heard a voice, a soft, fragile voice. "Spare some change? Anything helps." Evelyn froze. She turned her head toward the sound. Something inside her, some ancient instinct, tightened like a string being pulled taut. There, sitting against the wall, was a man with a lined face and eyes clouded by blindness. His clothes were worn. His hands trembled slightly As he held out a cup, Evelyn's breath caught. She took a shaky step forward. Maria reached out, alarmed. "Careful, don't get too close." But Evelyn didn't listen. She was staring at the man's face as though searching for something impossible. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. "Sir," she whispered, voice trembling. "What's your name?" Henry lowered his cup, startled by the unexpected gentleness in her tone. Blind eyes stared into the empty space where he pictured her standing. "My name? It's Henry, ma'am." The world tilted beneath Evelyn's feet. She felt her cane slip from her hand. The name struck her like lightning, igniting memories she had buried for decades. She stepped closer, so close she could feel his breath. "Henry. Henry what?" He hesitated. I don't know my last name. I never knew." Her lips parted. Her voice broke into a whisper. "Oh, God, my baby." Her trembling hands reached forward, brushing lightly against the old silver bracelet on his wrist, the one he had worn since childhood, the one she had bought for him the day he turned 3. Her fingers traced the tiny engraving. Her heart stopped. The same engraving she carved all those years ago. H.C. Love. Mom Evelyn collapsed to her knees. Maria gasped and tried to help her up, but Evelyn pushed her away. She reached for Henry's face with shaking fingers, touching the scars, the burned skin, the weathered cheeks. Tears streamed down her face. Henry flinched, confused, overwhelmed. "Ma'am, please, what are you?" "It's you," Evelyn whispered, sobbing. "It's really you." Her voice, cracked with age and decades of grief, trembled like a broken cord. "I found you. After all these years, I finally found you." And though Henry could not see her, something deep in his chest recognized the truth, recognized the warmth in her voice, the tremor in her touch, the love he had been missing his whole life. The world around them faded. It was just a blind man and an old woman, reunited in the middle of a riverfront street, two souls torn apart by fate and stitched back together by a miracle. But neither knew that this miracle, beautiful as it was, would come with a cruel price. Henry's hands trembled as Evelyn held them tightly, as if the strength of her grip alone could keep time from stealing him away again. His breath came in shallow waves. He couldn't see the trembling old woman kneeling in front of him, but he could feel every ounce of the emotion pouring from her touch. Grief, hope, disbelief, and something deeper than all of it. Motherly love. For a moment, he couldn't speak. His throat constricted, his mind spinning in a haze of confusion. "Ma'am, I think you're mistaken," Henry whispered, guilt rising in his chest, as though he were about to disappoint a stranger. But Evelyn only shook her head, weeping softly. "No, I know you. A mother knows." Her fingers brushed the bracelet again. The metal was warm from his skin. She clutched it, bowing her head. "I engraved this myself. 47 years ago. My husband had just died, and I wanted you to have something that meant love would never leave you, even when I couldn't protect you." Henry's breath caught. Memories, shadows of memories, stirred in the dark corners of his mind. A warm hand, a gentle voice, a soft lullaby hummed at night. A blanket wrapped around him, laughing in the sunlight. A woman's perfume that smelled faintly of lavender. He swallowed hard. His voice trembled. "My mother used to sing. I think. I don't know. I don't remember her face." Evelyn lifted her head slowly, revealing a face drenched in tears yet glowing with fragile joy. "I'm right here," she whispered. "You're not dreaming. You're not alone anymore, Henry." He felt something break inside him, something he had kept buried for decades. And suddenly, without meaning to, Henry began to cry. Tears slipped down his scarred cheeks, hot and uncontrolled. His body shook as if years of loneliness were spilling out at once. Evelyn placed her wrinkled forehead gently against his. "I'm so sorry," she whispered through her sobs. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. I tried. God knows I tried. I looked for you everywhere, every day. I never stopped." Henry didn't know how long they stayed like that. A minute, a lifetime. People passing by slowed their steps, unsure whether they were witnessing a reunion or heartbreak. But Evelyn didn't care who watched. For the first time in decades, she felt whole. When Maria helped them both stand, Evelyn clung to Henry's arm protectively, as though releasing him would make him disappear again. "Henry," she said softly, steadying her voice, "you're coming home with me." Evelyn's mansion, which had once echoed with emptiness, now felt strangely alive when Henry crossed the threshold. The place smelled faintly of old wood and lemon polish. His fingers slid along the smooth banister, then the carved edges of the furniture. He imagined large windows, tall ceilings, and rooms filled with memories he had never been part of. "I grew up here?" Henry asked quietly. "Yes," Evelyn said, touching his shoulder. "Your nursery was down the hall. I kept it as long as I could, but eventually I had to pack things away. The pain was too much." She guided him through the living room and into a quiet parlor where a fireplace crackled. She always kept it lit in the winter months. It gave her comfort when she felt most alone. Henry's fingers traced the frame of a photograph on the mantel. A child's picture. His picture. "That was taken on your 5th birthday," Evelyn said softly. "The last picture I ever took of you." Henry's throat tightened. "I wish I could see it." "I'll describe it to you," Evelyn said, her voice shaky but warm. "You were wearing a little blue sweater. Your hair was messy, just like your father's. And you were smiling so big, the photographer told you to stay still, but you couldn't. You were too excited." A small laugh escaped her lips, fragile but real. "You loved life so much back then." Henry felt her fingers slide into his. She squeezed gently, as if trying to replace all the moments she had missed. That night, Henry stayed in a guest room with a soft bed, the softest thing he had felt in decades. Evelyn sat beside him, holding his hand just as she used to when he was small. He spoke quietly, unsure of himself. "I'm afraid." "Of what, sweetheart?" Evelyn asked. "That. I won't know how to be your son. I don't remember anything. I don't remember you." Evelyn cupped his face with both hands, her palms trembling. "Love doesn't need memory," she whispered. "It only needs presence." Henry felt tears sting his eyes again. "And Henry," she added, voice breaking, "I don't care how much time we have left. Whether it's years or days, I'm grateful for every second with you." He squeezed her hand. "Me too." Over the next few weeks, their bond grew effortlessly, as if it had been waiting beneath the scars and layers of time. Evelyn read to him in the evenings, narrowing her voice into the gentle tone she once used when he was 5. Maria cooked warm soups, and Henry would sit nearby, listening to the clatter of pots and pans, remembering the kitchen at Benny's. Slowly, he began to smile again. Every morning, Evelyn would sit beside him at breakfast and tell him stories of his childhood, the swing set in the backyard, the stuffed bear he carried everywhere, the way he used to fall asleep against her chest during thunderstorms. Henry drank in every word, and Evelyn, for the first time in decades, felt peace. But beneath that peace was a truth she'd been hiding. Evelyn was sick. Her heart, weakened by age and years of grief, was failing. She felt it every morning, the heaviness in her chest, the dizziness, the quiet tug of fatigue, but she kept it a secret. She didn't want to worry Henry. She didn't want to darken the precious moments they had finally recovered. She had found her son again, and she refused to let illness steal time from them. But time, as always, did not ask permission. One evening, as Henry sat in the living room, listening to the fire crackle, he heard the sound of something falling in the hallway, something heavy, something wrong. "Mom?" he called, panic rising in his voice. There was no answer. He reached for his cane, heart racing, and moved toward the sound. His hands trembled as he touched the floor, searching, until he felt the soft fabric of a sweater. Evelyn's sweater. She was lying still. "Mom!" His voice cracked with terror. "Mom! Please! Please say something!" But she didn't answer. He touched her face with shaking fingers. Her skin was cool. Her chest barely moved. Maria rushed in moments later and cried out, "Call 911!" Henry held Evelyn tightly, sobbing as sirens echoed faintly through the distance. And in that horrible moment, terrifying and fragile, Henry whispered the words he had held his whole life, but never had the chance to say, "Mom, please don't leave me again." But fate, once cruel, had returned to finish what had begun 45 years ago. Henry rode in the back of the ambulance, with Evelyn's hand clutched in both of his. He couldn't see the flashing lights or the frantic movements of the paramedics, but he could feel every tremor of the vehicle, every desperate breath Evelyn struggled to take. Her hand felt so small in his own, so fragile, as if the years had already thinned her life down to its final threads. "Stay with me, Mom," Henry whispered, voice cracking. "Please, don't go. I just got you back." Evelyn tried to speak, but her voice was barely a rasp. She squeezed his hand once weakly, lovingly, before exhaustion pulled her under. At the hospital, doctors rushed her away, leaving Henry sitting in the hall, gripping the cold arms of a plastic chair, his chest tight with panic. He couldn't see the red lights flashing above emergency room doors. He couldn't see the nurses moving quickly or the way Maria cried silently beside him. All he could do was wait and imagine. Imagine losing his mother again. Imagine returning to emptiness. Imagine the darkness swallowing him whole, the way it had so many years before. An hour passed, then another. Finally, a doctor approached. Henry heard the soft footsteps first, then the hesitation in the man's breath, a hesitation he recognized all too well. "Mr. Henry?" the doctor asked gently. Henry nodded, his hands gripping his cane until his knuckles turned white. "I'm afraid your mother's condition is very serious. At her age, the heart struggles to recover. We've stabilized her for now." But there was a pause, a long, painful silence. "She may not have much time." The words cut through Henry like a blade. He had survived decades of pain. He had survived loneliness, hunger, blindness, homelessness. But none of those things hurt as much as this moment. Can I talk to her?" he whispered. "Of course," the doctor said softly. "She's asking for you." Evelyn lay in a dim hospital room, her breathing shallow, her thin frame surrounded by soft, beeping monitors. When Henry entered, guided by Maria's arm, he reached for the bed immediately. His fingers searched until they found her hand. "Mom?" he whispered. Evelyn opened her eyes barely. A faint smile touched her lips. "My sweet boy," she breathed, her voice thin as wind. "You came back." "Of course I did," Henry said, forcing a shaky smile. "I'm right here." She lifted her hand, brushing his cheek the way she used to when he was small. "You grew up," she whispered, tears slipping from her tired eyes. "You became so strong. I'm proud of you." Henry felt his heart twist. "I wish I could have grown up with you." "I wish that too," she said, her voice breaking. "But fate was cruel, and still you survived. You found your way back to me." He swallowed hard, leaning closer. "Don't talk like you're leaving." Evelyn smiled sadly. "I'm 90 years old, sweetheart. I've lived a long life. But the best part, the very best, was finding you again." Henry choked on a sob. "I can't lose you. Not again." She squeezed his hand with the last of her strength. "You won't lose me," she whispered. "I'll always be with you, in every breath you take, in every step you try to make, even if you cannot see me." Her voice grew softer, fading. "My boy, I love you." "I love you too," Henry whispered, breaking. "More than anything." Evelyn exhaled slowly. Her chest rose once, then gently fell, and did not rise again. The monitor gave a long, steady tone. Maria gasped. Nurses rushed in. But Henry already knew. He felt the stillness in her hand. He felt the warmth fading. He bowed his head over her hand and cried harder than he ever had in his life, not like a man, not like a child, but like someone who had finally found home, only to lose it again. The funeral was small, just a handful of neighbors, nurses, and Maria. Henry sat in the front row, his cane resting against his leg, his blind eyes fixed forward. The pastor spoke of love, loss, and miracles. He spoke of Evelyn's unwavering hope. He spoke of a mother who never gave up. But Henry barely heard any of it. He felt the emptiness return vast and cruel, the same emptiness he had endured for decades. After the service, a lawyer approached him with a quiet tone. "Mr. Walker, your mother left everything to you. The house, the accounts, the inheritance. It's all yours." Henry nodded slowly. He didn't care about the wealth. He couldn't see it, couldn't enjoy it, couldn't feel comfort in it. None of it mattered without her. Weeks passed. The mansion remained silent. Maria insisted on staying to help, but Henry eventually asked her to take time for herself. "I need to find my way," he told her. He didn't explain what he meant. Maybe he didn't know. One early morning, Henry left the mansion with nothing but his cane and a small backpack. When Maria returned later that day, the house was quiet. His room was empty. Henry had gone back to River Street, back to the place where he had lived for years, back to the only rhythm he understood. People whispered when they saw him, a blind man who had inherited a fortune, now sitting in the same corner with his cardboard sign. Some tried to persuade him to go home. Some offered shelter. But Henry only smiled softly and shook his head. "I'm just trying to feel close to her," he would say. "This was where she found me. This was where I heard her voice again." And so, despite his wealth, despite the miracle of their reunion, the truth settled in quietly. Henry Walker, after all the twists of fate, remained a man shaped by loneliness. He had known love only in fleeting moments, and those moments, as beautiful as they were, slipped away too quickly. Fate had reunited a mother and son, only to tear them apart once more. And in the cold wind rolling off the Savannah River, Henry sat alone again, holding his mother's bracelet, whispering the words he never got tired of saying, "I found you, Mom, even if I lost you again."